The one in which there are way too many bugs. Welcome to Supernatural First Watch Podcast, a rewatch podcast designed to be spoiler-free and enjoyed as if it's your first watch. I'm your host, Kimberly, a self-proclaimed sci-fi and fantasy nerd. Previously on the road of Supernatural, we have just left Iowa University and the Hookman story, in which it is one of the tropiest of trope episodes that you can have, and according to IMDb, one of the creators' least favorite episodes in the entire series run. And now we're about to dive into another one of the least favorite episodes in the series run, so let's dive into the aptly named bugs. We open, of course, on what's going on in the grander world. There's a housing development with a lot of activity and a lot of construction going on, and two guys commiserating about how the houses look awesome and they're really fun, but they could never afford to live there. Then, of course, the guy hears a rumbling, a hole opens up, he falls in, and in the time it takes for his buddy to grab the rope to try and pull him out, something has happened. We know from his perspective he saw a lot of bugs, but from the other guy's perspective, who knows what happened there. And by the time he comes and looks into the sinkhole, his buddy has blood coming out of lots of orifices and is clearly no longer alive. Cut to Dean coming out of a bar, super excited with a wad of cash. Sam is lounging on top of the Impala, reading a newspaper, and they have a bit of an exchange around the ethics around how they get cash. In my mind, of course, I think it is a better idea to play pool for betting money than to create fake personas or real personas for credit card fraud. But they have a bit of an exchange around the ethics of making a living. Sam, of course, floating the idea they could get real jobs, and Dean pointing out hunting is their day job, but the pay is crap. And if they got real jobs, they might be prevented from being able to actually, collect their paychecks, considering how frequently they drive around. And of course, they might be stopped from being able to do their hunting job anyway. So, he continues the conversation, asking if there is a case, to which Sam says, yep, maybe. Creutzfeldt-Jakob, an actual disease in which many people were prevented from giving blood because of the fear of it for over 20 years, is the presumed cause of death, but he thinks it's a little hinky, and since they're close by, they decide to head out. So last time they were in Iowa, and now they're headed to Oklahoma. Who knows how much distance they've covered in between, but at least it is a state that is adjacent. So they head on over to the gas company because they know that the friend saw their guy die and introduce themselves as the nephews of the man who died down the hole. Even though the guy says he never remembered nephews being mentioned, they say that he spoke highly of him, and so Travis decides that, they're okay to talk to, and shares with them about the strangeness of his friend dying. He's clearly upset, probably not involved, and once again, Sam showcases his lack of ability to ask questions in a way that doesn't raise suspicions, at least in my mind, by saying phrases such as loss of motor control and acting weird before he died. But they get what they need, and then they head on over to the housing development based off of, I assume, Travis's directions. They approach the sinkhole in broad daylight while lots of construction is still going on in the neighborhood, and nobody looks their way, looks twice, or even notices that they're ducking under caution tape. And then they have an exchange that I really entertaining, where Dean volunteers because he doesn't want Sam to be afraid, which goads Sam into saying he's not afraid and is open to the coin toss. And of course, Sam loses the coin toss and is the one who has to go down the hole. I, of course, refer to this as Dean being his very best Huckleberry Finn impression by convincing him without convincing him that he wants to go down the hole. Again, they clearly wrap themselves up in a hose laying nearby this hole, and nobody approaches them. Cut to the boys in a car discussing what Sam found, which is a couple of really tiny beetles, only about 10, and Dean is not convinced this is necessarily a case, but hey, they're here, so they're going to continue to investigate. Of course, that decision is continued because Dean sees a sign for free barbecue and open houses and figures it's a great way to talk to the locals. As they head on up to the house, Dean expresses how creepy he finds the suburbs and that he would never want to live a normal life. In fact, if he had to do this and be surrounded by manicured lawns all day long, he says he'd blow his brains out. Which Sam finds surprising and shares that he really does want the normal life, to which Dean continues to harp in that they can't live a normal life because they are hunters and they know about what goes bump in the night. They get to the house where the open house is being hosted, and the head of development is the guy who opens the door and immediately expresses that they are open to people of all races, colors, religions, and of course, sexual orientation. And kudos to him, he barely trips over the words, but my goodness, this sounds like an exact writing out of an HR manual. And after a very awkward moment, Dean explains they're brothers. They're looking for a house for their father because he's getting older. And Larry says, of course, that seniors are welcome as well. Of course, something to note, nothing about anything in this development showcases that it's going to be a retirement community or even that it would have specialty items for people who are looking to be in a retirement community because they're getting on in years. So I find it a very interesting slip, but Larry, of course, is very clearly wanting to sell homes, so he welcomes them in and immediately starts waxing poetic about the area, how he found it, and it was desolate. He's transformed it in just 18 months to what they see here, and he loved it so much that he's already moved in. After introducing them to his wife, he wanders off, and immediately the head of sales and realtor approaches the boys and once again gives the exact same spiel about being accepting to everybody. Of interest to note, at the time of the airing of this episode, and the episode is supposed to be taking in quote-unquote present day, Oklahoma was one of several states that actually had just approved a ban in the Constitution preventing same-sex marriage. It's also one of many states that had absolutely no provisos or legal protection laws on the books, and no anti-discrimination laws had been passed in the state either. So, for being in Oklahoma, both of them not only assuming that they're a couple, but telling them that they are welcome to move in is actually quite progressive for the time. But of course, it's played as a joke here. But I do find it very interesting as a retrospective to look back that this episode took place 20 years ago. And while it's played off as a joke, both the developer and the head of sales are actually being quite against type for the area that this episode takes place in. Moving back into the story, after the head of sales comes over and once again gives her spiel, Dean decides, you know what, screw it. He calls Sam honey and goes off to find Larry again, while Sam is ready for a clearly awkward conversation. Dean is getting the tour to end all tours and notices the bugs on the counter, to which Larry replies his son is into insects. We cut back to Sam, still having a very awkward conversation in which the realtor is raving poetic about all of the different features that can be found in the house, even though she's not actively showing a house. And out of the corner of his eye, he notices a tarantula walking up to her and a kid who is clearly waiting for something to happen. He interrupts her loving ode to the housing project and walks straight up to the tarantula and coaxes it into his hands to give to the kid. He connects with the kid briefly and explains to him that things will get better with his father, which he somehow miraculously knows after a few short words with the kid where he says that he is not family brochure material. Then, of course, they're interrupted by Larry returning with Dean and angrily escorts his son away from the party where he's essentially trying to maintain his livelihood. And in this instance, I can actually understand the subtle anger and upset that the father is showcasing here because this open house is meant to be a way for him to pre-sell the houses that he's already clearly been hard at work building as part of his company. And his kid trying to scare the guests with tarantulas and worry about other insects can, of course, be very detrimental. But that's an interesting takeaway from that. While we view the conversation with the father and the son from afar, Sam starts up a discussion about how the guy reminds him of his father and not approving of his choices. Dean, of course, is not here for that conversation, and we'll come back to this later in our family business segment. They head on to talking about the case and trying to figure out exactly why the bugs might have gone crazy, including positing that maybe it's a Willard deal where the kid actually has control of the bugs. How creepy. And is making them do his bidding. While they're having this discussion, Dean directs Sam to go over to an empty house where he actually is able to pick up the garage door bodily, hide the car so that he can check out the steam shower and they can sleep in a nicer house for once. Of course, seeing as this is an empty home, I doubt there are beds, but I'm assuming the boys do actually have their own towels for the amount that they travel. It may not always wanting to use hotel towels, so they squat in the house, probably on the floor somewhere, but that way they're close by in case something happens. Cut back to the head of sales, and we have our requisite shower scene. And what do you know? Bugs are crawling out of her hair. And then, of course, she gets eaten alive or something to that effect by spiders in a very, very, very creepy scene. Prior to this, we see on the news that there is an insecticide sweep going around the area, mandated by the government because of an outbreak of West Nile, which could explain why the bug's behavior has changed, but not what's driving it. The next morning, we check in on the brothers, and Dean is clearly enjoying the steam shower because he's got his head wrapped in a turban towel, which I'm assuming is from his own duffel bag, when Sam informs him that on the police scanner, somebody died 3 blocks away and they need to go and check it out. They head on over to the crime scene, and even though it's super early and there's no reason for it, the head of development is there and does not find their presence odd and lets them know that the woman they met the day before has died overnight and he does not know why. For once, they actually use their brains and wait until the cops drive away to hop the fence and go into the house to see if they have, as Dean shares it, a bug problem. They luck into breaking into her bedroom directly, and Dean clearly tries to avoid disturbing the scene too much, and about 5 seconds into exploring, finds the towel that has a bunch of dead spiders inside, and well, clearly, it's a bug problem. So they follow their best guess and decide to go and investigate the kid. They pull up in time to see him leave a bus, but oh wait, he's not heading home, he's heading into the woods instead, so of course they follow him. They find him playing with an insect in the woods and coaxing some sort of bug off of the trees. And when the brothers confront him, his first thought is, wow, you're not actually here to buy a house? And then he asks if they're serial killers, and he takes them at their word when they say no. But it's clear he's also a little freaked out and knows something is odd going on because he says something is clearly up with the bugs and he goes to show them something. On the way to their destination, he has another short exchange with Sam, and Sam asks how old he is. When he shares that he's already 16, Sam explains that in just 2 years, everything is going to become magically better because he'll be old enough to go to college and leave the house and his father behind. Dean, of course, is not loving this conversation, a little bit defensive about their father, and states that people should not abandon their family. The conversation comes to a halt when they find an area where all sorts of bugs are congregating in the woods. Off to the side, they see an even stranger sight, which is the grass completely overtaken by worms thriving around, and they go to investigate. With a little bit of poking around with the stick, Dean discovers a hole and that there's something inside. So without thinking about it at all and without doing anything to protect himself and make sure he's not going to get sucked in, he sticks his hand in the hole full of worms, very creepy, and pulls out a skull. We cut to the Impala, and oh wait, there's a box of skulls, which is very creepy. They're clearly at a destination of some kind, and Dean and Sam proceed to have another heart-to-heart, where Sam expresses his frustration with their father. He claims, though, that he did respect him, but nothing he did was ever good enough for him, while Dean tries to explain that their father was simply scared about what might happen if he wasn't around. In fact, even after Sam left, their father would check in on him as frequently as possible by driving by Stanford and making sure nothing had happened to him. Sam, of course, is shocked to hear this and asks why Dean never shared it with him. And Dean, of course, explains, you know what? Phones work both ways, and it was clear he'd already made his decision. Of course, we already knew this because, according to the dialogue in the pilot, it had been some time since they ever had a conversation. So the boys are talking to a professor of anthropology by claiming that they're in his Anthro 101 course. And the professor says, oh yeah, of course, and proceeds with barely glancing at the bones to decide that they're 170 years old, and the geography would heavily suggest that they are Native American. Now, the show's producers got the timeline correct, as the Trail of Tears and what was known as the Indian Removal Act were in the 1830s. However, it's really strange because those acts actually forcibly removed Native American tribes to the state of Oklahoma into reservation areas. So while it is possible there are sections of the state that were deemed to not become Native American territory, they are talking about forcibly removing them in the one state where actually all of the tribes were moved to. So take from that what you will. Yay history, or it may be a misreading of history. Who knows? But also, of course, I do find that him taking a single glance at the bones without looking at the dirt or anything else, and the fact that they were so shallowly buried, I find it very difficult to believe that he could, at a glance, know exactly how old the bones were, or that the bones were from Native Americans instead of anyone else local. But it's TV, so we're going to keep going. And the boys literally ask the phrase, are there any local legends? And he mentions a Yuchi tribe in Sagolpa, about 60 miles from where they are, even though he says, according to the historical record, there were no Native American peoples or reservation on the land in that area, but somebody out there might know the truth. So they head out to the res, where they know an exact person that they want to talk to, which we get nowhere in dialogue that they should be seeking Joe Whitetree, but that is who they are looking for when they walk into what looks like a cafe. Dean tries to open the conversation, claiming his story from the university, and the man calls him out as a liar. When he switches tactics and says, you know what the truth is, the man interrupts him again and says, only liars use that phrase. So Sam's a little bit more direct and says that something's bad is happening and they want to know the history of the place. And the man realizes that this is serious and he's open to sharing with them whether or not they believe him. He shares that his grandfather shared with him something his grandfather shared with him, that 200 years ago Native Americans were living on the land and the cavalry came to relocate them. They were impatient, so instead, on the day when the sun and the moon shared the sky, they came for 6 nights, murdered and raped, and anyone left on the last night was killed in their homes, so that by the time the sun rose, no one was left alive. In his final death throes, the chief called out a prayer to the world, wishing that no white man would live on his land and survive. After leaving in their discussion, they realized that the date of the first death was March 20th, which tells us we are now in spring. and that is the spring equinox, in which, of course, daylight and sunlight and nighttime, are equal. And that 6 nights is tonight. So they need to get anyone living on the land out because it is cursed land. Of course, in my brain, my immediate thought is, yeah, right, good luck with that. We cut back to the kid who's outside, and he sees yet some more bugs, and of course he's freaked out. Meanwhile, Dean is trying to yet again impersonate somebody else, this time Travis, the man they met from the gas company, explaining that there's a gas leak and they need to get out of the house. Of course, the man's not buying it because he actually knows Travis and hangs up on him. So Sam somehow got the kid's number, Matt, and calls him directly, claiming that he needs to get his family out of there. It doesn't take too much convincing, but Sam determines that he's just going to have to make his father listen, even though he knows by example, I am assuming, that that's not going to actually work very well. So Dean takes the phone and tells the kid to fake a very specific medical issue to get them out of the house. By the time they get to the house, of course, the family is still there because they know what's best, and the father is super pissed and wants to throw them off their land. Dean tries to explain that, look, there is something horrible coming and they really do need to get out. And he doesn't believe them until he hears the massive swarm of bees, and Dean and Sam realize that it is too late. Then proceeds one of the most realistic fights and shelters, I believe, in the history of the show so far, and I'm going to guess in the history of the show in total, especially considering the creator considers this one of the worst episodes of the series run, in which, even though everyone else we've seen dies practically within a minute or two of the bugs getting near them, not only do swarms of bees break through the house several times, but a single can of bug spray lit on fire, which would actually use the material even faster, is enough. And going into a crawl space where they'd be actually even closer to vents where bugs could get in is enough for them to shelter for 6 hours minimum until dawn. When, of course, even after several break-ins from the bugs, they make it until morning. Cut to another day, or maybe the same day, in which they drive back up to the developer's house to check in on the family. They're moving out of town, and even though it was the biggest financial disaster of his entire career, he doesn't care. All things are healed because it's TV land, and father and son are at least getting along for the moment. And then Sam and Dean have a heart-to-heart about their own dad. Sam is determined he actually does want to find his father, and he's worried about him, and Dean does too. And the reason why Sam wants to find him is because he wants to apologize. To which Dean replies, yep, you'll apologize, and within 5 minutes, you'll be at each other's throats. But it sounds like a plan, so they hit the road again and once again drive off into the sunrise. The local legend for the week is a Native American legend in which they share about the massacre and murder of an entire people's by the local cavalry, i.e. the army, in a bid to relocate the natives from their own land. And it's said that the chief issued a prayer or a curse among the land so that white men shall not live in the valley for all time. And if they do, that every year they will be attacked for 6 nights, just like his own people were. And they use the actual phrasing in the show, the local legend, which I just found really entertaining. Other supernatural baddies mentioned include the idea of some sort of telekinesis or mental control of bugs, which again is very, very creepy. Elementals and telepaths. You've seen them before. We have a lot of familiar faces to anyone who watches science fiction or fantasy of any kind. The professor of anthropology is played by Jim Burns, best known for his role as Joe Dawson the Watcher in the TV show Highlander. The gas company man is played by Ryan Robbins, who is got recurring roles in Stargate Atlantis, Sanctuary, and a number of other random shows filmed in Vancouver. If it's on the Sci-Fi Channel, he's probably had a guest spot. Same goes for Andrew Arley, who plays Larry Pike, the developer. He has a notable role in Fringe and various other science fiction shows also filmed in the Canadian area. It's the family business. I'm really glad I actually did take the time to rewatch this episode to gather notes. Bugs are not my favorite thing, and as I've shared and the producer has shared, this is one of the least liked episodes of the first season. However, we do actually get a lot of character development within the very creepy and over-the-top Bug storyline. We get a huge insight into what it was like for Dean and Sam growing up. By Sam's perspective, Dean was the perfect one. Nothing he did would ever upset their father, and nothing Sam did was ever good enough for him. Whereas also Sam shares that he believes their father was always on his case, and maybe based off of his reactions, there's a potential that he also got yelled at a lot by their father. To which Dean also contributes to this when he says that occasionally their father had to raise his voice, but that Sam sometimes deserved it. Now, of course, we are talking about kid to adolescence perspectives here, but I think it does give us an interesting insight into what it was like for Dean and Sam growing up. Dean shoots back that Sam couldn't understand where their father was coming from. And in fact, he was actually incredibly scared and worried about Sam's safety. And that's why he didn't want Sam to go to college. We find out also that Sam not only was attending Stanford, which is a very prestigious school, but that he got a full ride scholarship to Stanford as well. There's a whole bunch of question marks for me on this as well, considering what we've seen and just heard by stories so far about their childhood, but no spoilers. So just interesting to note that Sam must be incredibly smart because he got a full ride to an Ivy League school. Also, we find that while Sam has not communicated with their father at all since he left, or as he phrases it, Dad kicked him out of the house, Dad has actually been checking in on Sam throughout his time at Stanford, swinging by whenever he could, as Dean phrases it, to check in on him and make sure that he was okay. He says that Dad was actually incredibly proud of what Sam has done. This also ties into what we heard in Phantom Traveler, where the man they're speaking with says that John was constantly sharing how proud he was of his sons, which seemed to be news to both of them at the time. So Dean clearly did know that their father was still concerned about Sam and would frequently go and check up on him, but he had not shared that information with Sam. When Sam asks why and is clearly shocked but also upset Dean hadn't shared, Dean says, "Well, dude, the phone works both ways." And this is a really great deep dive insight as well, because based off of dialogue in the pilot, it seems rather clear that Dean and Sam have not seen each other in years and may not have spoken in a couple of years as well. So it begs the question, right? If Dean had shared with Sam, would Sam have even believed him? That's my question. Also, if Sam had not spoken to Dean, was it because they just fell out of touch, or did Dean try and keep in touch with his little brother, only for Sam to completely ignore his messages? So it's one of those things of which perspective is true, which perspective is false, which one rings positive, which one doesn't. It leaves a lot of questions, but it does showcase that there was a lot of tension growing up, and that Sam's perspective is that their father was never happy with him, whereas Dean is very much in the role of wanting to defend their father and claim that he did the best he could, and he was a good man who raised them as best as he knew how. So this, of course, brings up all kinds of questions for me. I look forward to seeing if we learn more about their dynamic growing up and what that was like, because it's also clear that they do love their father. Sam does want to find their dad now, and he wants to apologize to him for all of the things that he said in their last conversation together, which really makes you wonder, what did they exchange, especially since from Sam's perspective, he was kicked out and that he was not proud of him. In fact, sharing that he's not even sure that when they find their father, Dad will want to see him. And Dean, of course, sharing that he thinks they'll be at each other's throats within 5 minutes, even with an apology from Sam, shows that there is a lot of tension. They have not been getting along, and that there's a lot more to the story. So clearly, though, they both do want to find their father. They're dedicated and committed to that act, but it is going to be an interesting time if and when that happens. It's trope-tastic. We have the requisite shower scene right before a woman dies, and of course, very creepiness where bugs are coming out of her hair, and a few other pieces like being completely swarmed and having one small little can of bug spray and a lighter is enough to hold off an entire swarm of bees. While there aren't too many call-outs in terms of cinematography, basically I feel this entire episode is a trope. There's bugs kill people, bugs are everywhere, and bugs are creepy. And I have to agree. This, again, is not exactly a favorite episode to rewatch or to even watch the first time. But it does have a huge amount of development for the family business and for the Winchester family story. So we do learn a lot about Dean and Sam and what it was like for them growing up. And that, of course, creates a lot of intrigue for the future. So in conclusion, before I started my rewatch of this episode, I would have said you could easily give it a miss, give it a skip, because it's creepy and it's full of bugs. And if that squicks you out, like it does for most people who aren't entomologists, then you could skip it. But there is a huge amount of development in the Winchester storyline and diving deeper into the family business and the relationships between all of the Winchesters. So it's a very interesting story in which there's a lot of character development, but it's hidden in a story and in a plot that is just kind of ridiculous and over the top. And of course, it shows that the show is also incredibly progressive, and that's an interesting takeaway because it's only been a few years since the first gay characters appeared on TV, and they're actually poking fun at others' perceptions of the brothers being in a gay relationship, but also at a time where the state that they're in, they have local characters shouting out and spouting a credo that's straight from an HR document about being accepting of everyone, including people of sexual orientations, in a state that had no anti-discrimination laws and actually had a constitutional ban on gay marriage on the books. So it's a very interesting balance, and there's a lot of fun little moments in this show in between all the very, very creepy bugs. So up next, we will be on the road again in the episode Home. You're listening to Supernatural First Watch Podcast. Don't miss out on future episodes. Subscribe to the show in your podcast player of choice, including Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, and Spotify. Got opinions, theories, or comments to share about the road so far? Send in your thoughts at the email in the show notes. Want to help support the podcast? Want fun behind the scenes looks, extra episodes, and a shout out on the show? Subscribe to the Patreon in the show notes. We'll see you again on the road in the next episode of Supernatural.